Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, please click on like and subscribe. If you've been here before, welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how to make this nice pressure treated outdoor rated table. This is not a really heavy duty load bearing table. I did stand on it, so I'm 240 pounds and it held every bit of me, but it's not made for that. This is made just to hold drinks, towels, things like that. So I made a drawing here of what I'm going to do. I'm using deck boards, so my deck boards are 5.5 inches wide. So by doing that, if I do 5 of them across, that gives me 27.5 inches wide. Now these deck boards are wet still. I just got them from the lumber store. They haven't been dried out. They are going to shrink, and they're going to shrink a good bit. So when I put this together, I'm making my frame 26 inches wide instead of 27.5 inches wide. I want an overhang anyhow, but these boards are going to separate in the middle. So just as if you were doing a deck or something else, I'm going to butt these up so they're touching each other. They will space out over the next month or two. So I'm cutting my framework out of treated 2x4s. These aren't going to move as much as your top will, but these will still move, so you're still going to have to come back and finish this unless your wood's already dried out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and measure out these 23-inch pieces. Since I've got more of those than anything, I've got 6 of those at 23 inches, 2 inches wide. Now by using a 2x10, 2x10s are only 9.5 inches wide. I should be able to get 4 pieces out of each one I cut off of here, and that's why I did the 2x10. If you can't haul the 2x10 to your house, or if you can't, if you don't have the tools to cut it down, you can use 2x4s, 2x6s, whatever size lumber you need. We're gonna end up with a 2-inch wide board when we're all said and done. So it doesn't matter how you get there, but buying 2x10s, 2x12s are a lot cheaper than buying 2x4s. And one other quick note, what I didn't tell you right there is my 23 inches. I'm going 26 inches wide. This is the side of my 2x4 here, so it's 1.5 inches. This side's 1.5 inches, so I need to subtract those 2.5 inches from the 26. So 3 minus 26 is 23. So my inside edge is actually 23 inches. Now my length at 21, which is my next cut here, goes from top to bottom. These pieces side on the inside of that, so we want the full 21-inch length there. Same thing when we get down to this bottom piece, when we're doing our lengthwise for our table. We want the total overall length to be 46 inches. These are going to be 2 inches wide, so again, 46 minus 2 is 42. I'm using decking boards. These are 1 inch thick. They're different lengths. Most of them are 96 to 96 3/4 inches long. And I want this 46 inches wide, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut mine at 48 inches, give or take a little bit. By doing that, that'll leave me enough room to overhang off one side or the other, or both sides in this case, by 1/2 inch. So when the wood shrinks, it'll give me enough room that I can trim it off after I know it's dry. And I'm not going to glue on the top boards because I'm going to go back later, most likely take them off once it's dried, sand them, and then finish them then. So here are my rough cuts. 21 for my legs. I've got 2 boards cut at 23. 4 of these, when I rip them down, will be the top and bottom of the left and right, and 2 of these will be supports for the bench itself. And I got my long boards, which will be my sides. Now this is up to you. I'm only going to put a support at the top on both sides. I'm not going to put a support beam at the bottom. I want my table to be open underneath. So this is my 42-inch piece. This is what's going to go across the front and the back. 5 of those. Again, I'm going to butt these tight together because they're going to shrink and it will leave a gap. Nature will take care of the gap for me. Once they're dry, I'll take a skill saw, rip them off, make them nice and even. So I want to rip these down to 2-inch wide boards. The first thing I need to do is get rid of my rough edge. Now there's 2 ways of doing this. I can run it through up against my fence like I'm going to do on these, because this is an outdoor piece and it doesn't have to be pretty. If you want a more precise cut on here, you can take a straight edge like you've seen in some of my other videos. If not, check them out. Like an I-beam level, or I've got a piece of aluminum bar that I use to make sure I've got a nice straight clean edge on here. Because what can happen is if you got a wonky board, it can walk down the saw with you. So as you're pushing across your fence over here, you can actually end up with a crooked edge, even though you're running up against your fence. So basically what the aluminum bar does, it puts support on both ends here, so even if there's a gap or something in the middle, you get a nice clean cut on the other side. Again, outdoor piece of furniture, going out by a pool deck. I don't care if it's perfect or not, but it'll be pretty close. So I'm going to rip the edge off of here on each one of my boards. I'm just going to rip one side off, and I'll be back with you when I get that done. So after that, I'm going to set my fence for 2 inches. Now again, you can make these 3 inches wide, 2 inches wide, 1.5 inches wide, whatever you want. I just decided 2 inches sounded like a good number, so I did it. I only need 2 on the long pieces, the 46-inch pieces. I only need 2 for my support beams, but I'm gonna go ahead and rip them all down to 2 inches wide. I use 2-inch wide boards all the time, so I'll use them in another project. Now, one more thing you may notice, some people will probably point it out if I don't call myself out on it. I'm not using a rip guard or a rip fence back here. This 10-inch cobalt table saw is good for cutting wood, but the rip fence was wonky. Never could get it to fit in there nice and straight, so I removed the rip fence. It's not so bad if you know what's going to happen and you can prepare for it, or if you've got a harder wood or something like that, it's less likely to bind up. Sometimes using wet wood like this, what will happen is the wood will tend to bow in on itself. And when it bows in, it can create a bind on your blade and actually shoot stuff back at you. So if you go super slow with your blade, don't push your cuts or don't force your cuts. If you see it starting to bow in, you'll be able to see it when it's happening. Either slow your cut down or pull the piece of wood out or shut the saw off, but do not stand directly behind the saw while you're cutting anything wet. You shouldn't be behind the saw anyhow, but especially when you're cutting something wet and there's a potential of it kicking back on you. So there's all my frame pieces cut. I've got 6 23-inch, 4 21-inch, 2 43-inch. My decking planks are over there up against the garage door, waiting to go in. My extra 2 pieces of this and 2 pieces of this I've sat over here on the edge, ready for the next project. So this is my basic layout. This square and that square are my ends. These 2 long pieces will go on the front and the back on the tops of these. These 2 pieces here will be the same size as these. These will be supports. So I need to pocket screw these in. Now you can pocket screw them, deck screw them, brad nail them, clamp them, glue them, however you want. I'm going to put pocket screws in mine, and I'm going to use those cheap little plug-in fillers, even though they're not weather treated or weatherproof, and plug my screw holes if I want to at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and mark on these boards where I want my pocket holes. I'm going to put 2 in each one. And again, if you don't want to see the screws, you can come up from the bottom. This will be on the inside of the table, so you won't see it as much, but you will be able to see them from the opposite side of the table if you're really looking for them. Most people aren't going to be really looking for them on your outdoor furniture, but if you want to cover those up, put your pocket screw hole in the bottom on this one and clamp and glue it. So I got my pocket holes drilled here. I'm ready to put this together. I'm going to glue both ends. I don't care. I mean, I don't want to squirt all over the place, but I don't care if I get a little run out again. This is not going to be finished today. It's going to dry out. I'm going to have to sand it and finish it later anyhow. But I do want it to stick very well. I'll take a large clamp and I'm going to clamp these together and make sure they're even. Now my table is the worst table probably to do this on. It's definitely not flat, but I'm going to even these out by hand. Get them pretty close. I'm just going to do the bottom part for now. I'm going to clamp these in place. If you do not have a clamp long enough to put across these, you can get a board and attach to the end of your table, or use anything solid to push up against so you can put pressure on this joint while you're screwing it down. I've just got my clamp loosely in place. It's not all the way on there yet. I'm going to slide it to the edge. I'm going to take another clamp, or again, you can do this by hand if you want to. And I'm just going to flush out the end of the board. That way I know it's nice and even at the end. So I'm going to set this up now. I can see my end pieces are nice and smooth. I'm going to go ahead and clamp that down tight and put my screws in. So I'm using outdoor screws. If you don't use outdoor screws, it's probably not going to matter as much as far as holding your piece together because the glue is going to hold it together. But what will happen is you'll get moisture and water up in there and you'll end up rusting. So there's one of our end pieces done. I'll just have to do the other side. So there's one end piece done. We'll just have to do the same thing with the other side. Tilly, what you doing over there? You're making a mess. And one last thing again on these, if you want to use these hole fillers, feel free to plug the holes. When you sand them off, you'll never know they're there. It is treated wood, so it's going to look a little bit different, but it's just going to look like a plug instead of a pocket screw. So with my two end pieces together, I'm ready to put my front and back supports in here. So this is either my front or my back. Now my table is upside down from this position. So I'm going to do the same thing I did with the other. I'm going to line these up and make sure you turn these the same width as your leg is going. So this is 2 inches wide this way. I don't want it going up and down like this because I don't want to make a nice trim piece. We're not worried about what it looks like from the front. We're worried about the support on it. So I'm going to turn it sideways along with that. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to flush it up with the top with my finger, clamp it down and screw it in place. And make sure if you plug your bottom holes like I did, make sure you put your bottom pieces on the bottom and not on the top. So I'm ready to put my pieces in the middle here. I'm going to just kind of eyeball mine, get them mostly close to where I want. There is a math formula to figure out how you want to do this. Basically, you would take your 42 inches. We've got 3 pockets, so you divide it by 3. You take the width of your boards. You subtract the width of your boards to find the center of your boards. I'm just going to eyeball it, get them close. I know it's around 12 inches. When I spaced them out, I've got 12.5 inches there, 12.5 inches there, and 12.5 inches over here. So since I'm going to glue these, I'm going to just take a pencil and I'm just going to make a mark. Again, rough mark, estimate, guesstimate, whatever you want to do with it. Just so you have some idea about where to put it back in at. I do want to glue both sides of this. Since I'm going to put it in place and it's going to pressure fit, I don't want to bow it back out of there to get the other side out. It's not going to be perfect on the other side until we level it out, but we're going to do it fast enough that our glue is not going to sit in place anyhow. So I'm going to take this side, I'm going to push that side away from it because it's easier to push than it is to pull. I'm going to get that side where I want it at. Wipe off my squirt out, if any. Put that one back in. Yeah, I'm just getting these close to where they need to be. Clamp. I'll flush this out so it's nice and flush on the end. This way. Pull it tight. Now again, we're not worried about this side right now, just this side. And ready for the last side over here. Alexa, what's the weather?
Currently, in Conway, it's 90 degrees Fahrenheit with clear skies and sun. Today, you can expect mostly sunny weather with a high of 94 degrees and a low of 73 degrees. Also, there's a heat advisory in effect until Sunday, July 2nd, 9 p.m.
In case anyone was wondering why I was dripping all over my project here. So there's our table on the ground. Ready to put our top planks on now. So I'm ready to attach my top here. I'm using 2-inch deck screws instead of the pocket screws because they're cheaper. I'm going to make sure I hit these 2 front ones in the 2x4s. Now this is wet pressure treated wood. These are going to go right through. If you're using cedar, something similar to that, you may have to pre-drill those first so you don't chip it or crack it or split it. Make sure you put a line on here and get your first 2 by using the 2x4 at the end of it here. Now I'm not gluing mine. You can glue yours if you want to. Again, if this is finished wood, and you're going to paint it or it's inside or something like that, you can glue those down and keep them in place. So after I get this side screwed on, I'm going to stack my other boards up. I'm going to work my way across here, putting 2 screws in each one of these, down the middle, all the way across. I'm going to butt this side up so it's nice and smooth together. And then what I'll do is I'll take my saw and I'll rip off the other side of it just so I've got a nice clean edge until I go to finish the project. So I'm going to rip off the end of this so I've got a nice even table, and technically for the next month or 2 that'll be it. Battery. So the last thing I need to do is rip off this edge so I've got a nice finished end on this end. Again, the other end I flushed out when I was putting it together. I'll flush this end off and I'm leaving the overhang. Again, this is about 1 inch, maybe 3/4 of 1 inch on both sides, and that way when the wood dries out, shrivels up, shrinks up in a couple months, I can come back, finish my edges off. Again, I've just got them screwed in, not glued. I'll probably unscrew them. I might even run them through the planer instead of sanding every board. Finish the tops, finish the sides, and be done with it. If you were worried about a little instability sliding back and forth, you can put a cross beam across the bottom of there to keep that from happening. The table is pretty solid. It's not going to go anywhere. For what we're going to use it for, we're just going to throw towels, drinks, whatever on it in the summertime here. So it does exactly what I needed to do. For a good example of the separation, here's the steps I built on another video. If you check on my playlist, you'll find it. If you look down through there, you can now see the gap in between the boards. When I put those together, they were side by side just like these. Now we are in the Carolinas. It is 90 today. It's supposed to get up to like 96. Humidity is high. And summertime, it's going to get beat on. I'm full sun all day. There's no trees around that's going to block this. So after about 3 months, this is going to be separated just like that was. Hope everyone enjoyed the video. Hope you get some ideas off of it. Again, there's a lot of things you can do. You can trim the face, you can overhang it more, overhang it less, make your planks thinner, make your planks wider. This is just my idea. Hopefully you can feed off of it and get some good tips off of it to make your own designs.